Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. This week I want to focus on the Brawl commanders. Not for Brawl, but for Commander. I don't think that Brawl is going to take off as a format, even though it has paper and arena support. I think it's wishful thinking on Gavin Verhey's part that people will actually embrace this format, but it doesn't really have anything to offer paper players. I get it on arena, and I get the pre-constructed decks for paper might entice some people to buy them and then maybe upgrade them later on after Brawl rotates into Commander, but your average player, I think, is just going to skip that process, buy the Brawl decks, immediately take the commanders out and start from scratch for an actual commander deck, not a Brawl deck for these commanders. And these are goodies. There are a lot of synergies with these. I don't think any of them are going to be unpopular. I think they're actually going to be very, very popular next coming week on EDH Rec for people posting deck lists. Now, that's already started to happen on EDH Rec, and this is the time period that I like to get in on cards because we're starting to see trends. And even if it's more casual trends, those are always good indicators of cards that are going to go up. So for this week, we're going to focus on those specific cards. And lately, I've really liked in the past couple of years Commander as my go-to specs. Modern is all over the place with the bannings or the new cards that get printed out of Modern Horizons, and Pauper's really weird as well. So Standard has rotation. I prefer Commander when I look at cards to invest in. It seems to be work with more known information rather than unknown information. Occasionally a card like Paradox Ninja gets banned, but it doesn't have the effect like a card like Faithless Looting getting banned in Modern and then crushing the prices of all the cards that were contained in the deck. If Paradox Engine gets banned, the deck still fully functioning works, and the cards still have play elsewhere. So anyway, we're going to start off with a Layla Artful Provocateur. I don't know why I have such a hard time pronouncing Provocateur. This one is a fairy deck that you can go a number of different ways. It can work off casting a lot of enchantments, can work off casting a lot of artifacts, and can actually be like a fairy tribal. So there's a lot of ways that people are starting to go with this deck. You can see fairy tribal and enchantments are the number one at the moment. And this is going to give you a good idea of cards that are undervalued comparatively to where the cards are going to go. So this is kind of my daily routine for MTG finances. I'll go and look at new commanders and go to EDH Rec and start to follow the trends. Now, like I said before, you don't want to discount casual trends. See, in Modern, you absolutely do. If a deck can't perform, even if like Saffron Olive or a few other people make some wonky decks and it has a good showing for like a week, usually that trend doesn't last and the cards come back down to earth after people realize that this deck isn't serious. Commander has a different effect that people tend to like net deck off of other casual players because it is more of a feel-good format rather than what actually does the best. And in fact, competitive EDH is pretty much frowned upon in most circles. And so following the casual trends, I think, is better than following the competitive trends. So even if I don't prefer some of these cards, and there are plenty of them that I'm like scratching my head of why would you slot this in the deck because it just doesn't feel like it's powerful enough, casual players are going to eat these cards up. So you can see there's some EDH Rec will start with new cards. Kind of ignore that. New cards just is good if you're looking at an old commander to see what upgrades people are putting in them. I do this specifically for the more popular commander decks like Lord of Windgrace and Atraxa. So when a new set comes out, you click on them on EDH Rec and see what new cards people are slotting in because those are going to have demand just based upon those decks, those popular commanders. But anyway, the new cards we'll skip over for these Brawl ones. Reprint, same thing. But the first thing in EDH Rec, it will show high synergy cards. So these are the cards that people are throwing a ton of them in the decks and have more synergy with this specific commander than they do with others. This isn't too important. It will show you some cards that are more synergistic with this commander than anything else, but you typically just want to find the most numbers of cards that are being used in the decks. And some of the high synergy cards will get there. Skull Clamp here says it has a high synergy. It's kind of weird though. Okay, I guess it's because it's 74% of the 38 decks and it's got a huge synergy, but any sort of deck that uses 1/1s is going to use Skull Clamp. Skull Clamp did miss a reprint, so Skull Clamp I do think is a good target to go up. In fact, I actually called this one for going up because of the Atlee, the one that produces eggs, is a way to kill those eggs and actually get value out of them. So I think Skull Clamp with fairies, of course, it gets the double synergy with creating a 1/1 when it comes into play. if you have your commander out, and then you can then equip that fairy and then draw 2 cards. So Skullclamp I do think is going to have enough of demand from this new commander to actually go up in value. Typically Skullclamp will go up in value unless it's reprinted in Commander 20 or the new commander set, in which this time it dodged. So I think this is a pretty good spec. You look at like cards like Bite of the Thassa and Coastal Piracy. Those are where people are going at the moment with having your go wide strategy to draw a lot of cards. I don't think this is too bad of a focal point for cards that could invest in. Bite of the Thassa did just get a reprinting in the Masters 25, but Coastal Piracy is one of those cards that does typically it goes in a lot of commanders and has been reprinted for a while. The TCG player versus Card Kingdom, you can see there, is actually, when there's usually a TCG player price that's above Card Kingdom, that does show movement, because that will show either one of them. If there's a huge price discrepancy, will usually show a lot of potential for a card. And then you could, of course, go to the site where it's actually selling slower and get out on them before they catch up with each other. So then we have cards like Intangible Virtue, which have a little bit of synergy with the creature tokens, but there might just be better Anthem type effects. But this will give you a kind of an overall idea of where people are going. The Mason Enchantress, the Anointed Procession, the Scion of Ona, all of those are great indicators of tribal enchantment, that this is the route that it's going. So now what I like to focus on is the top cards. And before I actually get into this, I did over at Rogue Market do my top picks for each one of these commanders. So after you watch this video, go ahead and head over to my Rogue Market channel, and you can look at my 4 specific specs that I'm actually investing in. I wanted to start doing this for most Market Mondays, to actually do like a TLDR version and show you the cards after I do the Market Monday of which ones I invest in. I kind of did it reversal this time around. But you can see that cards like Anguish Unmaking, that typically are going to go up anyway, are being included in the vast majority of these decks. Swan Song, Closely Prisons, those are pretty much evergreen in most commander decks that can actually run the colors. Same thing as Cyclonic Rift. So nothing too fancy here. These are very typical cards that are being used in multiple commander decks, not just this commander deck. But where it gets interesting here is on creatures. So it does look like most of these fairy tribal creatures are interesting to get in on. So Sprite Noble, I think, is pretty good because that's, it's that Eternal Masters. Even uncommons out of Eternal Masters have potential of going up. It's an old enough set. It's rare enough set. We've seen uncommons just skyrocket before. So Sprite Noble does seem a little bit interesting to me. Both the Glenalandra Archmage and the Glenalandra Liege also look pretty interesting, especially the Glenalandra Liege, because it does have that double duty of both being an Anthem effect and a fairy if it goes in a lot of like the tribal fairy. Like if people go more the tribal route rather than the enchantments or artifacts route. Coat of Arms should be another card you should be keeping your eye on for this specific card. But then we can look at like Oona, Queen of the Fae. Not a lot of synergy because, again, your commander's actually doing more than the Oona is. And other people like the Psymaster Thopters, it looks like it's having more movement with TCG player versus Card Kingdom, because it's another card that will double dip with your commander. You'll create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token, and you'll create a 1/1 fairy if you have both of them out for each artifact you cast after that. Cards like Metallic Mimic, these are very typical going in the tribe. So it looks like that's the route that Alayla is actually going to go. A lot of people are going a little bit of both directions with this tribal fairy slash, creating a lot of tokens with artifacts. Let's move on to Chulainn, Teller of Tales. Chulainn, Teller of Tales is basically a good stuff commander. So it's going to, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, and then you can put a land card from your hand on the battlefield after that as well. So this card is a lot harder to try to kind of gauge what people are going to buy specifically for this, because it just is a good stuff enabler. You can basically justify putting any creature in this deck that has a lot of potential by itself, because it's just going to get a little bit of ramp value as well as drawing a card value out of it. So I'm thinking that a lot of the cards that bounce themselves are going to be good in here, like the Cloud of Fairies, the Peregrine Drakes. Those are going to be really, really popular with this, because then there'll be the free mana on top of that, and anything that can untap Chulainn plus there's going to be those obvious combos like the Peregrine Drake and the Cloud of Fairies and the Palincrone that will work with this with anything, again, that untaps, like Deadeye Navigator as well, I'm sure, will go in here, or the Sabertooth. The Sabertooth then bounces it back to your hand. All of those will, I'm sure, are going to be able to enable some infinite combos. So anything that has the tap-untap type ability where you can untap creatures. So if there's a creature that can untap a creature for, like, 3 or less, then with the Palancrone or the Peregrine Drake, and any sort of taps for 2 land is going to be very good with Chulainn. There's also like the cards that just came out of the more recent sets where when it comes into play and untaps an artifact, if you have a big mana rock that taps for a lot, here's another way to untap the Chulainn. Of course, Paradox Engine would go great with this. The card was banned, rightfully so, with it. So let's see exactly where they're starting. Again, we're gonna ignore the new cards and go right to the high synergy cards. So people are going Elf Ball. That's not surprising. It seems like Elf Ball is pretty good with Chulainn, with the Llanowar Elves, Beast Whisperer for double duty, Elvish Mystic, and maybe it's not even Elf Ball. Maybe this is just the early mana ramp, because mana ramp in the form of creatures is smart in this particular deck because it's better than like cards like Farseek and Cultivate, because you're getting that value out of your creatures being cast if you draw them after the commander comes out. So Llanowar Elves turns into basically an Elvish Visionary plus being able to throw a land into play, which is good, and then add for mana later on. So thought cards like Shrieking Drake or other cards, when they come into play, return a creature, going to be smart to get maximum value of that. Tatvoyel, Benthic Druid is going to get maximum value with lands into the battlefield and drawing even more cards. You have the Whitemane Lion. But again, one of the things that I look for is cards that do have potential of going up. And so far, a lot of these commons with high supply, they're not something that I'm too focused on. Tatvoyel is kind of interesting because this card has been slowly going up. The supply of Dominaria is huge, though, so keep that in mind. But the first one that Intruder Alarm does look quite juicy with this deck. It seems like the TCG mid plus Card Kingdom is razor thin. I'm not sure that this has a lot of potential to grow Intruder Alarm, but this is a card that's probably going to be used quite heavily in the deck, and I'm sure Cloudstone Curio is going to have another bit of a bump due to this commander. I'm surprised this card has not been reprinted. So now we're seeing a lot of the usual suspects, Coiling Oracle, Swords of Placer, Cyclonic Rift in these decks. These are cards that see play all throughout Magic. We have Chorus Guardian Project being very good in here. And then we look at creatures, Dreamstalker, Seedmore Muse, Chorus Skyfisher. Again, a lot of these cards that bounce cards. Bloom Tender is getting very interesting because I don't know where the limit of Bloom Tender is. This is another commander, another recently printed commander with 3 colors in their mana cost, where this is just a powerhouse for tapping for a lot of mana. So Bloom Tender does seem like it could have another bump, but it's already incredibly expensive. To the left of it, the God Eternal Oketra, though, does look even better as a potential spec, where the Spark is not really being opened that much anymore, and this gets a ton of value with with that commander, with casting the creatures and leaving back a 4/4. So Karametra, God of Harvest, is a card that I particularly like just because I show in the video the trajectory is already good. And so I like it when a commander that comes out and a card wants to be in that commander. It just creates the acceleration for where that card would normally go, because there's a lot of decks that like to use this in Commander anyway. So this is another one just to scroll through here. Sometimes you can skip past the creatures and see if there's any enchantments or artifacts that have even more synergy with the deck and whatnot. So there's a good one with Chulainn. We have Korvald, the Fey-Cursed King. This one is another one that's hard to gauge where people are going to go. I've seen it go a couple of different routes. One is like a landfall / get your lands back, like Crucible of Worlds type strategy by being able to sacrifice them. So we have like the Splendid Reclamation, Lord Windgrace type strategy. And then there's, of course, just your regular Aristocrats-based strategy. So Goblin Bombardments, the Phyrexian Altars, those type of cards where you can sacrifice your creatures and get value out of them are going to be going up because of Korvald. I think the Aristocrats type, Sacrifice and Aristocrats are 2 very, very popular themes to go with it. So let's just skip down here again with the high synergy cards. We have Awakening Zone. That one actually doesn't have that great of play throughout other commanders. It does seem pretty good because it gives you a 0/1, and what does it say? Whenever you sacrifice it doesn't have to sacrifice it, right? So yeah, whenever sacrifice a permanent, you put a +1 counter and draw a card. So absolutely, The Awakening Zone is good because these things can be sacrificed at will for mana. So these Eldrazi spawns in general, I think, are going to make good synergies with this commander. So of course I like Phyrexian Altar. I think that this one is due to go up. I talk about it more in my Rogue Market video. And even cards like Phyrexian Tower that are also from Ultimate Masters is poised to start going up because of this specific commander. Pawn of Umogs, those type of cards. Curse of, I guess Treasures. Treasures work really well too. Or gold tokens in this case with Curse of Opalescence. So Pitiless Plunder, that's another one. Look at the price of Pitiless Plunder. I think Card Kingdom's actually paying a pretty... they were paying... What was it, 40 cents last time I checked for Pitiless Plunder, which is pretty good. This is a spec that I went on pretty deep on the foils. I own quite a few copies of these foils. But yeah, Brass's Bounty. Yeah, these type of cards actually are pretty good. I think that's the route to go more with this commander, is not even Aristocrats. Maybe have that as sub-theme. Of course, Phyrexian Altar plus Gravecrawler is a great combo. But like just Brass's Bounty and other ways to create a bunch of artifact tokens or treasure tokens is very good with this particular commander. As you can see, people are on the Crucible of Worlds plus Fetch Lands is another way to put counters on it. Rinse and repeat. Fetch Lands are going to go great with it. And you can, of course, like cards like Secure Tri-Builder. And even the Aristocrat type strategy with Blood Artist, Sulapul, or Cutthroat. Those are pretty good. Here's another card I've been watching quite closely is the Dictate of Erebos because it did miss the reprinting that I thought would be reprinted. I did move a decent amount of Dictate of Erebos because I didn't think I think it's the most played card in black that hasn't seen a reprint yet on EDH Rec, and it's actually quite old in the scope of things. Most cards that see as much play in Commander have seen reprints, and this one for whatever reason hasn't. So anyway, pretty interesting cards to scroll through. Last is the Sir Gwyn, Hero of Ashvale. This one is another one that's a little bit hard to gauge if people are going to go heavier on the Knight Tribal or heavier on the Equipment Tribal. I think the latter and turning turn this into a Voltron type commander is probably the smarter way to go, as the equipments on Knights, which is your commander, become 0. You can cast a lot of equipments that cost basically nothing to cast and then have high equip costs, then equip to your commander, especially ones like that can give it haste, and that's the way to build this commander. But people are going Knight Tribal with it, so don't look over Knights here. So here's a good example. Colossus Harbor was just a match made in heaven for this particular commander. That puts it up to a 15-15 and it almost one-shots people with commander damage. So high synergy cards again. You're going to see a lot of Knights. You're going to see a lot of equipments that will go on the commander. And then we have a lot of the enablers like the Open the Armory. I think that's the route to go. I get it, like giving your commander indestructible, or the one that the Kinsbale Cavalier by giving it double strike is quite smart. But I don't think I think that most people when the dust settles are going to go more of a Voltron commander than a Knight Tribal, but I could be wrong here. But top cards in here, of course, a lot of the similar cards that have been of course, these top ones will go in many different commander decks, but this is where it gets interesting. Like the Balan Wandering Knight, you can see the spread between Card Kingdom and TC Player, so this one is absolutely starting to move. And has double strikes along with 2 more equipment, and you can attach all equipment to it, so it can be an alternate win condition if your commander gets shut down. Moran Crusader, it does have the double strike. Protection with black and green. Looks like there's a little bit of movement there. And even like Adriana, Captain of the Guard, this is going in so far 50% of all the decks with the melee ability and all of your other creatures having melee. So, good to just scroll through these and see where people are headed with this particular deck. Yep, other ways to give your Knights double strike. Valiant Knight looks like it's got some movement here. This was a bulk rare card for a while that I was scooping up for 10 cents a piece. Just because I thought, down the road, 3-4 years down the road, these cards are going to be actually worth money, and they're great to buy lists from that. A lot of people don't look that far ahead, but when it's pennies on the dollar that you can get on some of these specs, I think it's a decent little investment to sit on. I mean, it almost feels like yesterday that I was in Vegas for 2015's GP Vegas and have a bunch of cards from then. So don't look away from long-term. Typically, I like short-term specs, but long-term specs are great as well. So it does look like Stone Hero Giant is starting to move pretty close to TCG and Card Kingdom. This is also one that hasn't been reprinted for quite a while. You get to search for equipment cards and put it on the battlefield and attach it to a creature control. Pretty much value here with the Stone Hero Giant. That's another great spec that I think has potential for this. Seems to be like this one's the least popular one. What would we see here? We have 10 decks that have been listed so far with the Knight, 38 with the Corvald. Chulainn has 93 decks already, and Alayla has 38. So it does look like Chulainn is the big winner. So this is the one I'd definitely be focusing on. So anyway, that's all I'm going to do for this video. This is basically my strategy when looking at new commanders that come out. I do this with every set pretty religiously. Just scrape the numbers down, keep coming back. Like, this is still quite new. When you really start to get a lot of data is when people have the card in hand and start building it in paper and then start sharing it around on their different deck lists with where EDH Rec gets their data from. And then you really start, and you can actually do it with MTG Goldfish too. MTG Goldfish has its own commander section, and you can get a double verification with looking up Chulainn on MTG Goldfish on their commander section and seeing what cards people are using in that. But do not underestimate these type of cards. I think that people are actually going to look back at Brawl with especially some of these commanders, and I would not be surprised if these are going to be more popular commanders than the Commander 2019 commanders, and this is going to be the product that really shines through. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. This is Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder for Market Monday. Thanks for watching.